So allow me to welcome you. It's a little bit afternoon, and I'm going to speak slowly as I get the introduction started here. My name is Ken Schwartz, and I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, teach at Tulane University, and obviously licensed in the state of Louisiana and a couple of other states as well. I'm here along with my friend and colleague, Don Brown, who is, both of us together are the regional representatives of the AIA College of Fellows. And you probably already know this from email that you've received from your component executives, but we're here this afternoon to provide you with information to help you better understand the process of attaining fellowship in the American Institute of Architects. About 3% of architects are members at the fellowship level with that recognition. You'll hear much more about this in just a few moments. Before we get started here, again, I want to let you all know that we're recording, just so that you know that and you're not surprised. And we're recording for the benefits of others in the AIA community who couldn't make the Zoom in real time. I want to thank the 5 component executives of the states that constitute the Gulf States regions. They have been responsible for getting the word out, and we're very grateful for that. And also the presidents have been involved, very involved, along with a number of current fellows, people who already are fellows from each of the 5 states. And you'll be recognizing some of their names on the screen up until the time that I switch to screen share so that we can make the presentation. I want to thank also in particular, Jeannie Jackson, FAIA, who is the chair of the Regional Representatives Committee of the College of Fellows. She is the person who herds the cats and makes sure that all of us are focusing on our role of helping to encourage architects within the region, within our region, to consider the possibility of going up for fellowship and to provide support, information and support along that process. And you'll hear much more about that from Don in just a few moments. Again, for those who just came in, please put your name, city, state, and email in the chat. And we will use that for our distribution purposes into the future. So without further delay, it is my great pleasure to introduce Don Brown from Alabama, who is going to make the presentation. I'm going to be monitoring the chat. And so I would like any and all of you to put any questions that you might have into the chat. And when something seems timely, I'll pipe in with Don so that he can respond to the questions, and that there can be a flow with questions so that you don't have to hold them all the way till the end. We'll also have a record of the questions because they're in the chat, which is useful. So without further delay, Don, I'm going to share the screen and hand it off to you if that's okay.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to recognize a young lady who is joining us from Washington, Mother Church on 1735 New York Avenue Northwest, Makia Hazelton. Wave your hand, Makia. There she is. She's been very helpful. We noted, we know most of the staff that have been involved with honors and awards for a long time, longer than I'd like to own up to, and with fabulous predecessors. And there have been some adjustments lately with some new staffers. Doug Paul is one that I worked with as a national vice president for a couple of years at great length for actually 4 years. He's now involved with that as well. And Terry Stewart is the senior vice president manager of this whole process. Since Terry and I have known each other for 15 years, and she's just, there's incredible senior leadership, and they're providing the help to Makia and others who are in turn being extraordinarily helpful to us. So thank you for joining us. She's got a jury to run on COAT, I think. Am I right, Makia? Here.
Yes, already in progress. I'm just a support, but it's one of the many things happening.
We're gonna send you her contact information so that if we can't answer the question, then she's the one tagged to give us a hand. From my point of view, very quickly, I've been a practitioner for 45 years. By now, I ought to know better. I've enjoyed that. I've taught a thesis and other courses at Auburn, chaired the School of Architecture, on the executive board for the College of Architecture, Design and Construction. Now I've enjoyed the refreshment that you get out of working with the Academy for a long period of time. I was on the national board for a decade. Somebody said, are you bragging or complaining? But I've enjoyed that.
Yes.
I ended as the national vice president for a couple of years. I run advocacy for a good period of time, run Market run the knowledge communities for an extended period of time. So I've learned a lot more than I probably have brought to the table, but
Oh, that makes sense. Okay. Thanks for
a
telling
number
me.
of
Thanks for
years-
following up so quick.
Hello.
All right. Have a good day.
For several
I'm
years,
straight. Appreciate it.
somebody's still on, you need to mute. For several years, I had the privilege of being the board representative from the Gulf States region, and I was able to attend a couple of dozen conventions across the Gulf States and have a lot of friends there, and have an enormous number of architects that I respect and admire greatly. Today's audience is going to consist of three kinds of folks: the candidates that are planning on a submission very soon or now, potential candidates near term, and then emerging professionals, hopefully, that want a clearer notion of what's involved. Hopefully will inspire those folks to want to produce careers of impact. But we commit, both Ken and I, to helping all of you in your quest by connecting you with fellow fellows throughout our Gulf States region, or those with specific skill sets that you'd like to learn from. We have about 40 slides that we'll show. Some of those we'll go through quickly. Some of those are substantive and we'll want to spend some time to work through them. Essentially, a quick overview, the dates that are important, and that's just steaming upon us now. We'll spend a lot of time on the submission itself and what constitutes it, so that you can more precisely envision what your pathway is going to be to decide to continue or to begin to flesh out your submission. The objects is a little clearer discussion, but fun. We could spend an evening talking about that with refreshments, but we will be brisker here. Some notes about what the jury consists of and how it works and what they look for. And then, of course, resources. Slide, please. This is the kind of the obligatory overview. You know, what is fellowship? We do more than just proudly wear a pin. We recognize widely the achievement that's recognized by peers and by the public. And we talk about that 2 or 3%. What that really means is that there's another 97% of our colleagues out there that are extraordinarily impactful, professional, and superb, and have not either submitted or considered themselves ready to submit for increased recognition, but they're all good. Slide, please. What does the College of Fellows do besides wear a pin? The purpose of fellows is really to advance the profession, to recognize impactful achievement. And the foot stomper here is that achievement that provides value to others, other architects or the public. If you're doing it for yourself, that won't cut it. It will show up. But if you provide value to others, which is what we should aspire to in our profession, then that's worthy of recognition. And we have an obligation to reach out and mentor and encourage younger architects to create that same value. Slide. The data, real quick overview. About 40% and change were elevated. Interestingly, last year it was 42%, in 19 was 41%, 18, 51, 17, it was 69%. So there's no quota, but the typical quantity is 40 to 50+% of those that have submitted. Obviously, 2/3 to 3/4 that are submit the first time typically are elevated, and the objects, which we'll talk about later, are distributed. Object 2, the bulk of them are from practice, and 1 is design, 2 is practice, 3 has led the institute. Guys like me that have been in that world for a time. The public service, alternate career, and then educational research are smaller, but entirely notable slides. The dates that you need to remember are 2. One is the 28th of June is when the portal opens. Used to, we sent it in with carrier pigeons. Now it's you populate your submission in real time online, and it works really well. You can submit material so that you're not fighting that deadline of too many gigabytes for the Wi-Fi at due date at midnight. So you have 3 months to get your, before this opens. I suggest that you get a blank form of the application before then to begin to work. And then 6.5 months from now is showtime. The shred is over. If you're going to shoot for this year, you've got to hustle. Next. This is the most important segment of our presentation today. And it's, again, we're going to try to shoot toward being largely done in 45 minutes, and then have time for Q&A, but we'll break up in between if we need to answer questions. The submission clearly must be, your contributions have to result in specifics that others view as valid and useful and impactful. We need nouns, facts, details, not adjectives, adverbs, buzzwords. Be careful. Documentation, that last bullet, is incredibly important. You have to verify the effect. You have to have created a positive influence that is of value to others, but it has to have documentation of how that occurs. Slide. This is a very important slide, and copy this, and if you take a shot of this at the moment and think about this as your guidepost. It's all about what your story is. It matters that what you did specifically that has value to others. It's not a lifetime achievement recognition, unless your impact has been occurring over a long period of time. But it's remarkable how people describe their activities, but not the impact. Slide, please. Those that are eligible simply are those that have been in good standing for at least 10 years, all total, and you must be an AIA member at the time. It's an AIA award. Slide. There are a couple of ways that nomination can occur. This is not hard. In fairness, this is an AIA honor. So you either have to be nominated by your component, or you have to be nominated by a petition of your peers. This is not hard to do, but it's a requirement, and you better get working on that right away in order to get that one off the plate and start your submission. Next, please. This is the submission outline. We're going to talk about each one of these in turn. The first section, what's important, the sponsor letter and what it's supposed to do. Section 2, which is an expansion of section 1. 3, which is show and tell, the exhibit specifically, and then of course the separate 7 reference letters, 5 of which have to be by an AIA member. Before going through these, let me say that the question that many of you have had to me personally when I've helped folks in the past, where do I start? And I would simply offer the suggestion that section 1, which is a 1-page outline of what your career as an architect consists of and how it matters and what you've fundamentally done. That's a very important overview page that will be the first thing that a juror that is responsible for pitching your package looks at and tries to internalize. Slide, please. This is pretty straightforward, self-explanatory. Just follow the instructions on the website as you upload it. The criteria and the format have altered over time. Just be clear, be direct. There, at one time, there was a total gigabyte limit. You have to be careful when you get into high-res images on your exhibits. So be careful, but there's a 40-page max, and there are few that I've reviewed that have stayed within that 40 pages at the outset. Don't worry about culling it down to 40 pages until you're down the road, but internalize these objectives. Don't let that third item from the bottom summary state that's not overreaching. We joke about, don't let your marketing people in your firm write this, or it will not work. Slide, please. Select someone yesterday. If you haven't already got a sponsor, you're in trouble, but select somebody that is knowledgeable and capable of understanding your story. If you're from the academy, then you might consider getting guidance and a sponsor who is in that world because they understand what the pluses are and how to get there and how to document it. They've been successful at doing that before. And you might even have a backup, because every once in a while, sponsors something can happen, life happens, and there may be some difficulty, but they should know what to do. They'll help you craft your package, even though it's your responsibility to write it, unless you've commissioned someone to assist you. And their ability to be a liaison with your reference letters is absolutely critical, because that's something you cannot do effectively as a candidate, but the sponsor certainly can. So, the sponsor letter, good sponsors will know what to do in order to be helpful. Their main role is to summarize your story in one letter, and that's hard to do. You've got the whole page to write your summary in section 1. The sponsor letter has to do this in no more than 5 paragraphs, typically 3 or 4, an opening that defines it, a second one that defines main issues, a third one that is a second main set of points, and a close. All of it has to be there in crisp language. Good sponsors know how to write these, but the data has to be there, and it's up to you to supply the facts. Next slide. Section 1 is fun to write. If it's what you should do first, in my judgment. It is not what you would like to be known for. This is not meant to be an autobiography, and it's not a marketing piece. It's the collection of facts that are your value, that has ripple. What you should do is sketch out in 1 page, no smaller than 10 points, in main blocks of activity, what your value to the profession and the public consists of. Start there as an outline. And of course, they're the proverbial 35 words in which that's your epitaph. It's what they read at investiture that is the summary of what you're about. Next slide. You've heard about the phrase ripple, impact beyond your day-to-day. That's ripple is lasting impact. The geographical piece needs to be broadly appreciated. If you've been a star in your hometown but not gone further, then you won't be successful. Legacy through others is important. Have you created solutions, examples, and incentives that motivate others to adopt what you've provided, to show them the way to become more effective as architects? That's the fun part. That's what we should respect and value, and that's the core of being selected as a fellow. Next slide, please. 2 is the longer version of section 1. After you've written section 1, and don't just languish over it, sketch it out. Then take section 2 and become more specific in various categories. This takes a fair amount of time to produce. It's a description of what you've done in your career. What you'll find, though, is that there's missing information. You'll go through this and you realize you didn't document something. There's someone you need to reach out to. There are dates that you don't recognize. There are exhibits or examples, things that you need to flesh out your submission with, and you'll have to hunt them down unless you've been working on this for quite some time. Your story, this is a third notion, it's a personal one for me. Your story does not need to include all of your life's work. So many of us have been successful, have spent time and across a whole range of activities, and you have to pare it down to the story and the ripple that warrants fellowship. So this is where most of the work is in section 2. Slide, please. The tips on section 2 is there's an important aspect of this that you just need to know. What's missing in so many unsuccessful applications is that facts and nouns, declarative sentences are not provided as crisply as needed and in groups of work. Early submissions that I've read of a number of candidates tend to have adverbs, adjectives, aspirational language, meanders. There's the compulsion to embellish language. What you should do is list the facts, the results in order. Don't worry about fleshing out the language just yet. Put in specific events, awards, publications, flesh them out as you develop your package. Tips on 2. Next slide. The exhibits is fun to work on. Those are photographs of your work. They have to be verified by colleagues, signed off on, if you will. Choosing the examples that you want to illustrate your success is sometimes hard to do. You may need to work with a mentor of some kind, another fellow that will dispassionately tell you which support your narrative and which do not. You might collect a list of a broader number of exhibits and share those with the individual or individuals that are helping you with your submission. So you can, some people start with those things that they're most proud of, and you have to weigh those items, those successes from your point of view against what your story and your narrative outline actually consists of. And sometimes it's a bit interesting. Sometimes we're prideful about things that don't support your narrative. You just like them for an ephemeral reason. So that you need outside guidance in order to make that proper choice. Slide, please. Choosing those that provide references is a task that should start early because it takes time to find those individuals, explain to them what you want them to actually verify or confirm. And then if they're skilled at writing reference letters, and I'm very fortunate that mine mostly were way back, many of them have difficulty in expressing that affirmation of your story as briskly and cleanly and clearly as needs to be the case. And that's where your sponsor can provide assistance. It's long been said that those sponsors need to be from across the country. If all of your sponsors, all of your letter writers are from your hometown, your state, or even your region, that may be insufficient. If you want to substantiate a claim of having real impact across the country, real ripple, then it's preferable to have that support coming from individuals from across the range of this country, geographically, perhaps experience and age-wise. So consider what collectively all of those reference letters are going to say to the jury. Those take work. Slide, please. Submitting them is a tricky thing for people that are not accustomed to it. Each one of your letter writers has to upload their letter from their end. They're invited to submit that letter from the AIA website, and they will upload it and submit it. But I will tell you that in my case, where I've assisted reference writers, we've had a good deal of work to do to get them properly formatted, properly referenced before they're ready to submit them. Your sponsor should advise you at the outset of the kinds of references that mirror your story and your outline. You should start out with more than 7 individuals that might be able to do that. Some will fall by the wayside because of their own time and circumstances or health. And for lack of one of these letters, you may not have a valid submission. So your sponsor can help you with the format, organization to reinforce the story. Some are easy, some take a lot of time. Slide, please. All of these are important, but the last 2 are absolutely vital. And that is, you've got to focus on results. You can talk about being a leader. You can talk about organizing a conference. You can talk about having impact, but you've got to specify what, when, where, how many in the audience, what the date was, what its real impact on. You need to have someone verify that that actually occurred. You need to have a photograph of the event, and you have to provide evidence that you've done what you say in your section 1 that you have done. And lastly, and most importantly, the foot stopper is, what influence does this have on the profession? Yes, it's good to have influence on the public, but we're architects, and this is an award for performance as an architect. So how did you, in whatever way that you have created added value, how did it influence your profession, and how can you document that? In some cases, people are down the right road, but their achievements are not sufficient in number or breadth to warrant elevation yet. Ken, do we have any questions of anybody that needs an answer before we continue with objects? I see 47.
We don't have any questions in the chat yet, but I'm sure, actually, I do see one that just popped up. Let me just read it to you, Don. I'm chairing a fellowship committee for Arkansas. Does any component have bylaws and procedures for a fellowship committee that you can email him? And I will do so because I'm actually sponsoring someone in another region who has such an arrangement. There are some components that do have committees, and actually they really require architects within their chapter to work through the chapter in a kind of vetting process. It's also a mentorship process. But Michael, I'll send that to you following this Zoom.
I think Ken and I both realize that some components, New York City, New York, Dallas, Texas, there are a variety of California, there are a variety of components that have an organized pathway to assist folks as mentors. Some of them are formal and have rules. There are some components that will not affirm your submission. They won't sponsor your submission unless you've passed muster with the committee. Running the gauntlet and having submitted a draft package. So I will tell you that the greater the number of people that help you, the greater a chance of success you'll have with a submission. Those states with committees that provide oversight have a much higher percentage of successful submissions. Ken, don't you agree? And they vary depending upon where they are as to how organized they are. In our Gulf States region, I'm unfamiliar with what some other states are doing. The fewer the current fellows there are in a state, the less organized we tend to be in providing support. So one of the notions, let me just end my comments with this, about spreading this this webinar among all 5 of our Gulf States region states, is that you may have a colleague in an adjacent state or a nearby state that you know that could be of help. There may be somebody within the academy in our region that could specifically help you if you're teaching. So we wanted to broaden our catchment some so that you could get the right kind of support from any of us that you wanted as a potential candidate. So slide, please. Objects. A colleague of ours, Gray Placer, was supporting him for a role some years ago, and said, "What was your object?" He says, "Don, I don't remember. It was mid-90s, and I remember we had 11 objects, 11 categories." This has always been a bit flexible. There's design, there's practice, led the institute, that's the AIA thing, public service, government industry, alternative careers, service to society, and then education research, which is, we're going to go through these and talk about them briefly. What we'll tell you is that you might think you already fit in one of these categories, and it may well do so. If you're from the academy, you're likely to fall into teaching and research, and that's your niche. If your life's been spent in service in the Institute as an AI leader and your successes have been within that world, then you might think that that object 3 from time to time, that's not true. A separate evaluation of your package will sometimes tell you that you need to move to object 4 or 5 instead of 3. And people have been successful doing that a number of times. The first one, the one we think of most often, 18% of our candidates were in this category. And the footstopper here is that the jury very specifically does not judge design. They just evaluate whether or not other organizations and levels of our AIA community have judged your work as exemplary and worthy of being appreciated and absorbed by other architects. Slide, please. Practice, about 50% of the successful candidates are in this category. I know, however, of several submissions by individuals over time whose development of a specialty area widely adopted nationally were not selected. You know, you'd think that there was no way for somebody that wrote the book on a design for the handicap, or some other little niche of practice and value, would be a lock to be elevated in this category. I've helped individuals that were in the knowledge communities where they worked very specifically in an area of practice and were nationally recognized, but they were unsuccessful first time through. The thing to remember here is it's how you use facts to tell your story. You can be quite good. You could have produced work that helps the profession enormously, copied by others, has had national ripple, and produced a book, but you've got to clearly describe that effect in order to be successful with your submission. Slide, please. About 9% of those who were in this category were selected in this past year. But just being a national officer, a board member, or on the strategic council won't do it. So there are a number of people after their tenure in national office that have submitted a list of their participation over that period of time. I'm using that word carefully. And they have not been successful the first time around in a submission. You have to evaluate what is the legacy of your work as an AIA leader? What did you do more than being a participant at whatever level? Most of us that have been in this stovepipe have had every office at every level and have participated, but the question remains, what did you do that was memorable or made a difference or had ripple? And if you don't show that, just being there will be insufficient. Next slide, please. This is a hard one, but it's certainly important. There are a number of individuals who serve in government. They work in the Corps of Engineers. They work in Environmental Protection Agency. They work in some government entity for a long period of time. Many of them, unfortunately, may not maintain an AIA membership, but they work in industry. They head the Brick Association of America and add value. And fortunately, we have a category that is about 7% of our elevations this past year who have contributed enormously and can be specific about how they've benefited the rest of us. Oftentimes they become an industry expert that we rely on. And there are some wonderful people in this category. I've known several people who started out in Object 3 who've been encouraged to shift their story to this category and have been successful. They've headed a hospital board. They've altered the pathway to healthcare in their community that includes physical facilities and being able to provide for healthcare to a larger group of people. And they perform that role as an architect through an architect's eyes, but their success was in industry and public service, not just in the AIA. Next slide. This was about 8% of the selectees this past cycle. But the volunteer outreach that you might have if you're in this category must be significant in impact, both geographically or in scale. And it must relate to architecture. I've known some wonderful colleagues who have worked at Architects Without Borders, who've gone to other countries and helped rebuild, provide guidance to local folks, sometimes connected to a ministry, sometimes not, who participated in great public outreach and service, but the story was not told more broadly to incentivize others to participate, or the participation was very quietly done and no ripple occurred, no impact was felt. If you did that and wrote a book and published it and incentivized others to participate, then that's notable. So to some extent, you have to, I almost hate to use the phrase, Ken, brag about your work, but you have to not just do something, but it has to be recognized as having value, and it has to relate to architecture. The last slide, education. This was moved this past year to separately. It was in practice. This is one where I've talked to several faculty members that I know about what their next steps are. And I would suggest this is a classic example that you need to seek a sponsor that understands your vocabulary. Ken, you might speak to this one.
Well, the educators who go up under this category used to go up under 2. And I think either way, you need to be able to show that your impact either through the legacy of your students who have gone on to distinguished careers, or in terms of specific contributions that you've made in the area of research, building technologies, for example, or professional practice. It could be anything, but it has to be impactful. It has to have ripple within the context of architectural education.
This is every faculty member I've known. Every one of them aspires to developing students to improve and to have impact. I mean, that's what you're teaching for in the first place. The challenge is, in my view, is metrics. What happened before? What happened after? What happened because you were there on this planet teaching, doing your favorite thing? And I think sometimes those who might not be successful are those that are very introspective, interested in their own search, but aren't as, if you can't prove that you've inspired and created an impactful change in the development or career of your students, then you may not be worthy. But so many faculty I've had have impacted me personally, and they're candidates. They don't get around to this, or they don't participate in the AIA. And so we're trying, at least within our own sphere here, to incentivize those stars that I know that really have that capability to pursue this.
And we have an excellent example in our own region where Ursula McClure was elevated this past year. And her impact, not only at LSU, but also in terms of her national profile, made her, I would assume, a very strong candidate, and therefore was elevated to fellowship on her first try.
So, you know, the wonderful thing about faculty is that they can, I think, shut out a lot of the distractions that some of us in practice have and focus on teaching. On the other hand, some of the most impactful, wonderful faculty that I've known tend to be isolated from the AI and really don't pursue this. And so recently, I sit on the executive board for the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction, and I personally pursued several faculty members that need to raise their aspirations, and by golly, we're going to work with them to see what we can do. It's a win-win. Okay, it is 18 minutes till. We needed to be on the discussion of the jury right about now. Ken, we're on the mark. We'll be done in about 7 or 8 minutes with some additional Q&A, and we'll close on time. First of all, the jury, I don't know who they all are at the moment, but what I can tell you is that I've known well half the jurors over the past 15 years. And without exception, absolutely without exception, we all should be proud of the women and men who serve. They've had to work there. It's an enormous workload. They've been able to put aside personal interests and put on their glasses with wide perspective and an open mind. Sometimes I've had some individuals that were not successful claim that someone on the jury was opposed to them or didn't see their contributions as they should have. And I will tell you that there are processes within the jury functions that tend to diminish that substantially, that impact. It would be rare. So these people are to be admired and thanked. In the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about process, 2 of these, and the last 4 slides, we're going to be talking about what they look for, which is the right way, the coda to present this all back to you. So we have about 5 more minutes. First of all, the process, I'm not sure if there's anyone on the line that has actually been a juror member. We've had 1 or 2 before when we've done this. But here's how basically it works. All the submissions arrive. There were 219, I think, this past cycle. They're distributed. There are about 30 each for the jurors, and they're distributed very carefully so that if I'm from Alabama, I'm not given any package from my state or my nearby region that I might know or have a bias to elevate as opposed to someone else. I'm given others to look at. I'm prohibited on my honor to not evaluate anybody that I know, a friend. You're obligated to do that. And with those 30 are provided to you as a juror. Your role is to absolutely absorb that submission to be able to convey that to others in 5 minutes. Think about that. The reason that you have to tell your story succinctly, that first page, section 1 page, and that the sponsor has to reiterate this in 2 or 3 paragraphs, is because your advocate, your one assigned juror, has to tell your story why you should be considered in 5 minutes. And if he or she is confused, sees confetti on the page, it's not really clear, it's not documented sufficiently, then their ability to make an impactful presentation to the rest of the jury is difficult, and it won't pass. So you have to be able to tell your story clear, connected, and supported factually, because it has to be retold in 5 minutes. What happens then is that there's some shuffling. As many of us have been on design juries, it's really clear. Those that are successful are really obvious, and they just put those aside quickly and affirm them. There are some that are just insufficiently prepared that become an immediate no. Sorry about that, but they become real obvious. Then there's this vast gray area in the middle. What do you do? And they work through those at length. Now, the phrase is jury discussion 10 to 12 minutes. I know that varies. But the first pitch is made, and based on that first pitch, submissions are separated. And if there's anything unclear, or if a juror says, I would like to look at that again, then they put it back in the stack. There's a very fair process of making sure that everyone has consensus that something should be looked at more thoroughly. The story needs to be analyzed, and if you read the documentation that the jury provides for unsuccessful submissions, you will thoroughly appreciate the thoroughness of the jury in evaluating and stretching their minds and their perspective and their vision as much as they can to understand what your story is. So, and there are no quotas. The next 4 slides, and they're fairly quick, are those that are about what the jury wants to see. So you need to tack these up on the wall and think about these as you're preparing your section 1, your 35 words. Are you nationally recognized? Have you had impact elsewhere? What the heck is Ripple? Well, others have to follow and adopt what you've done. Somebody has to say, I learned this from Ken Schwartz. Sorry, kid. Oh, but you have, as dean, you have a lot of Ripple. Has the nominee been active in the AIA? And active doesn't mean that you've been in photographs and photo ops and at the head table. It means that have you been a full participant in the professional association that has more of its eligible members as members than any other professional association in this country. So you've got to be an AIA member. Slide, please. Is your work really distinguished, notable, and impactful? I've read drafts where individuals said so, but that without the facts and without others confirming that impact, and that just won't work. If you can't find that evidence, if you can't find those facts, then I would suggest that you wait till you can collect those.
Quick thing, Don, with the question.
Yes.
In every case presented, is every case presented by the jurors or just certain ones? And the answer is every case is presented by the jurors.
Correct.
And it's a good question, but as I did serve on the jury, and the assigned cases that came to me, as well as the assigned cases that went to each of the other members of the jury, it's your responsibility to present that to the full jury. And Don is right. There are some that are just amazingly impressive, well documented. They're kind of slam dunks if we're talking about basketball. And in those cases, the discussion may be relatively brief because presenting it makes the case. I will also say that when I served on the jury, it was very much like a jury in the sort of legal world, where the judge, at least every jury I've ever been on, the judge tells you, don't start your jury deliberations with a decision of guilt or innocence. Start by talking about the issues and go around the table and talk about the issues. So the job that you have as a presenting member of that jury is not to advocate for or against someone. It's to set the stage for the jury to make a vote, because ultimately it requires, I think, Don, a 2/3 vote in order for someone to actually be elevated.
Yep.
So Yep, that's it. And you want another slide here?
Oh, that was a perfect background. Let's see. Yeah, leave it there for the moment. It's a 2/3. It doesn't have to be unanimous. And every juror that I've talked to about their service has said that it's you put yourself in a different world and you try to put yourself inside the candidate and tell that story as crisply as you can. And you can, when you have something to work with, it's easier to present a positive result. If the data is not there, then it's a hard sell. So think about somebody else telling your story, and your job is to make sure that you do that. Next slide, please. This is the last primary slide. It is important that you've connected to our profession in some capacity. What leadership did you have in our professional body that the rest of us connect to learn, to improve, and to produce for the places that where we live and work? It's important. The reference to committee chair. Just being on the committee is insufficient. Did you create the committee? Did you create the effort? Did you invent it? Did you then share it? Did you produce results that have been verified, and who benefited? If no one else, this is probably the conclusion statement that I personally have. If fellowship is what you've done for others, and those individuals that have wanted to polish their own doorknob and want to celebrate their own successes as they see them, are not largely successful. If you think as you prepare your package, what have I done for others? What have I done that matters to other people? Then you'll see your contributions and your role in life in a better way. And not only will you be more useful to the rest of your colleagues and the public that you work with as clients and friends and institutions, but you will benefit the enormous number of qualified and capable men and women that are our trusted and loved colleagues in our profession. So think of it in those terms, and you'll be more successful in every way. Our resources, your resources as we begin to close are the AIA, and for Ken and I initially, and we have a collection of architects that are on the line here, which Ken will introduce in a moment. The staff, we'll send all this to you. The staff, including Makia Hazelton and others, will provide that information to you as well, but they're enormously helpful and they're busy all the time. Let's close, Ken, with having introductions by those who may be with us, but our commitment is to help each and every one of you that needs it from whatever state you're from. Thank you.
So thank you, Don. That was terrific. And I want to invite current fellows who are on this call, just one at a time, if you could, just introduce yourself. And the purpose of this is to allow prospective fellows, future fellows, to know who's here, where you're from, and that way, potentially informally, people might network with you, not only with Don and me. Don and I are here to help, but also there are many fellows in each of the 5 states. So who would like to start this process? Introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and that way people know who you are. I see Tracy Lee here, and Tracy's a friend and colleague in New Orleans. Tracy, do you want to get started?
Hi, everyone. Tracy Lee with SQ Dumas Ripple. Hi, Don. Thanks for the great presentation. I've been asked to join a committee, and someone else mentioned this as well from Arkansas. I've been asked to join a committee of fellows here in Louisiana to identify prospective candidates and kind of help them through the process. Because just as Don brought up, we've recognized that that the Gulf States group maybe is a little behind other components in a number of fellows that we've had elevated. And I think organizing ourselves and maybe presentations like this one, just trying to get out there and find the good candidates and inform them about the process will help us to get a little better at that as an organization.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Tracy.
we've had this discussion in Tracy's office before, but he served wine and appetizers. So I'm sorry, Tracy, we're down to screens. We'll be glad to come back to your place.
That's the New Orleans way, right?
So who would like to follow Tracy's lead?
I will. Michael Guano. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Michael Guano, currently at Fayetteville, Arkansas. I was elevated in the state of Missouri in Springfield. I've moved back. I've retired. I've moved back to Fayetteville, where I was on faculty for many years. And I have, as I've asked the question, I am chairing a new committee with the intention and hopes of increasing the number of fellows in the state. And what else am I supposed to say, Ken?
That's perfect. Thank you for your involvement. Anybody else here on the Zoom would like to introduce themselves? That is to say, current fellows. I don't know everybody on the Zoom, so I'm not sure if we have any who are hiding and shy, or maybe it's just the four of us right now. Well, since no one else is piping in, what we'd also like to do is just open up for questions. We have few enough people that if anyone would like to pipe in with a question, just unmute yourself and let us know.
Ken, my name is
Yes,
George
George.
Ewert. I was wondering if I sent you an email today, but if I could get Don's email. I submitted this year for chapter or 3, and I wanted to just have you all look at that and see if there's anything I could do to elevate myself, and that's okay with you all to send it to you for your
Sure.
review.
Yeah, I'll send you Don's email address. And
Okay.
which state are you in? I didn't catch which state.
I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee.
Excellent. Yeah, and you also have some fantastic fellows within the state itself.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been networking with them, but
Yeah, I had Marlene and John McCrae wrote reference letters for me, and then Scott Poole was my sponsor.
got it. So that's, yeah, Don, I don't know, are you willing to?
I'll take that one on. I have George, I'd love to catch up with you. My oldest daughter lives in Knoxville. How come visit?
All right, good.
That's a deal. That worked out well. And John and Marlene would have been on my list of people to talk to, and you've already been in touch with them. That's good.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else who is either planning to go up on this year's cycle or next year's cycle with questions about how to position yourself in this process, about objects or reference writers or sponsors?
So I guess my name's Ann McGarn, and I'm from the state of Tennessee. I'm actually the Tennessee state architect. And so this isn't something I had considered previously. I just don't think there's a lot of chatter about it. I didn't have a lot of peers who participated in it. So I'm really just trying to get started. And, you know, when Don said, well, if you don't have a sponsor, I'm like, I don't have a sponsor. I have a lot of people who've said I should do this. And so I'm trying to figure out how to track what I've done, what I've accomplished, but I've kind of had 3 different careers. So it's going to be interesting.
And I would be happy to talk with you one-on-one, in part because I've had a fair amount of experience with university architects and public sector architects who have been successful. Before I became dean at Tulane University in 2008, I was in the University of Virginia, and Virginia has quite a few architects who are working in the federal government or in localities or at universities. And actually, they've had a very high success rate of many of these terrific architects who have been in interesting and diverse careers like yours. So let's talk offline, and I'll be happy to give you some pointers about how to position. What Ann just shared is actually typical of many candidates for fellowship, which is to say that you're not necessarily limited to one object. I mean, you have to go up under one object, but you've had 3 careers, you just said. So probably, I'm guessing you'll want to go up as the state architect because that's an impressive and important role in itself. But you have other things that would be part of your package. So we could talk about what that looks like and what that can be.
Great. How do I reach you?
kschwartz@tulane.edu.
Okay.
And we'll be in touch after this call.
We have a list of everybody that's on the call. So what we'll do is send out a note. I'm saying we, that's Ken Tulane, but we'll send you not only the slides and information background, but contact information across the board. And I'll send you back a cell, and whatever we need to do to help out, we will.
And I'll just piggyback on Ann's question. I'm going to pick on a colleague of mine in New Orleans, Angela Morton, who is both the principal of a very fine firm in New Orleans and also a leader in terms of the AIA within our city and state. So Angela is another example of someone who will have more than just one area that she's celebrating when she presents her case. And I know Tracy quite well, and I know that Tracy had several different dimensions of his case as well when he went up. I'm an educator, but in my package that went up for fellowship included national design competition wins that I had. So I didn't really just go up as a professor. I went up as someone who won several blind competition wins nationally. And that says something about impact, and they were published. Other questions or issues among the members here? I'm really pleased to see so many people show up for this. And Don and I really weren't sure about how many people would come, but it is in part a tribute to your component executives and your presidents who helped to get the word out. And that's how I learned that Michael was working toward more in the way of proactive organization in the state of Arkansas, which is great to hear, and great to hear Tracy's work that he's doing in my own state of Louisiana. Any other comments? We're 2 minutes over, Don, but I think you did a fantastic job. And I really appreciate all of you being here. Any other words from the assembled group on Zoom?
I have a very quick question, hopefully. Sure. I'm Sheila Dalbarton with EOA Architects in Nashville. And Ann, you should definitely go for this. Ann is our state architect. I went up for Object 1, and I had a lot of comments of probably go for Object 2. I've been highly active in AIA, but I did have a question. One of my comments was I had, I think, 3 different states represented by letter writers, but it should be broader geographic representation. It's kind of hard to do that if you don't know someone very personally. How do you broaden that? And I can add 3 more for going up next year. So are there some suggestions of, I mean, maybe it's through a national jury, maybe it's through partnering. What are ways to do that?
Don, do you have an idea about that? It's a good question. Well, that's a real challenge to present that back to a jury. If you're in practice, and if you're at that top echelon of your profession, then you'll have colleagues from across the country. And if you've got several choices for a reference writer, you need to pick somebody from outside what might be construed to be a local or localized reference group. If you're in the academy or if you're in design, somebody out there was on a jury that was from someplace else. But if all of your design awards were from the Memphis chapter, that's insufficient breadth.
Yeah, so, I think 4 of my 10 were from different states, but it said it should actually, I guess 6 were from Tennessee. Tracy, yeah. Did you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer that one thing that happens when you get elevated is that you start getting asked to write reference letters, and it's an enjoyable, interesting thing to do. And I've been asked before by people whom I didn't know personally well, but I knew their firm and I knew their work. And once I read their submission and convinced myself that they were really an integral part of that firm's work, I felt much more comfortable about writing the letter, even though I didn't have a personal relationship with the person.
And Sheila, if I could add to your brief description, I think maybe the bigger issue is the object. I'm sure that you have very fine design work, and it's made impact. But it may be that you have a strategic advantage under Object 2, where you also still have demonstration of your exhibits, but really you're pushing the argument about distinct and unique contributions that you've made in practice that have made an impact. When I was on a jury, I'm obviously not going to mention any names, but there was one person who went up who really should have been a slam dunk in one of the objects, but he chose another and really sort of suppressed the importance of the part where the jury felt like he had his more major impact. I don't know your case, but I'm saying that it may not be just about the letters. It may be about the object itself and how the argument that Don has described so well, how the story unfolds in support. So you're in Nashville, you said, right?
Yes. And I
I
will
don't know.
say that I kind of straddled 1 and 2. And actually, Tracy, you probably know Skipper Post. He was one of my
Sure, of course.
letter writers, and he said, Sheila, you should go for 2. I should have listened to Skipper.
The other person,
Sheila, it's been great to meet you. And Skipper is fabulous.
Yeah.
He was one of the only people in the Southeast that had ever been elected nationally. So I told Skipper I would be the number 2. Here's the thing. You need a dispassionate observer, reader that can look at your package through a completely new set of eyes. Sometimes you're so close to it that you remember my note about you. This isn't a story you want to tell about yourself. It's the story that exists based on the data that's there. So get somebody else to take a look at it. One of the things as a closing comment from me is that what Ken and I are trying to do regionally, and we're choosing to maintain our connections among our 5 southeastern states, regardless of what AI is doing with governance, which is a different set of requirements. What we're trying to do among people that we know across a broad spectrum of practice in the academy, we want to collect a list of people that can assist people just like you, Sheila, who want feedback from somebody that doesn't happen to live in Tennessee, that's from someplace else in our region that can help you clarify that story. So the documents we'll send back to everybody that's here is the list of fellows that we know of. And then as the case is, I think we have a number of fellows that are very retired and not willing to make a priority in life to be responsive, but there are so many that will and can. So we'll pitch in your case and anybody else that happens to be on the call, look at the list, make the first phone call. And if I get a call that I'm not capable of helping, I'll pitch it back to the group and we'll find you the support that you need.
and Sheila, I have 2 quick questions for you. One is if you want, or not a question, but a statement, please send me your package. I'll be happy to take a look at it. And it's been a number of years since I was on the jury, so I don't have any influence or any involvement with them directly, but I will give you my sense. And then the second thing is, was Marlene Davis one of your writers?
She was my sponsor.
She was your sponsor. Okay,
Yeah.
so she's already looked. Have you asked her the questions about what do you think this means as I go forward for a second try?
We haven't had a chance to connect, but I think she was on board with, it's probably object. I was in the wrong object.
Yeah.
I
that's what I'm guessing too, but I think very highly of Marlene. She and I actually started teaching together in another state at another time. And she was a phenomenally successful dean. I'm a huge fan of hers. She was also president of ACSA and really prominent in both the academic world and in the professional world. So definitely spend some more time with her, but send it to me too. I'm happy to look at it.
Thank you.
Marlene is just whip smart. She's brilliant. I'd do anything Marlene told me to do. You pick the right sponsor, you'll get this done.
Yeah, thank you.
That's great. Well, thank everyone. It's been great to have you all here. And as you can already tell, if anyone has any follow-up questions or just wants to touch base with either Don or me, or both of us for that matter, please do. We're here to help. We would love to see the Gulf States region elevating people, all people like yourselves who are highly capable and worthy of a consideration. So best of luck and best wishes to all of you. And I want to thank Don for showing me the way. I've never really participated in one of these before. And I knew that I would learn a lot from him, and I knew you would too. So thank you, Don, for taking the leadership role.
Cheers.
Take care, everybody. And you'll get a follow-up from us.
Thank you all.